So today we're looking at visualization, which is the step one of the manifestation process. And this is according to Thomas Troward, who wrote back in the 1800s, was one of the prominent New Thought teachers. He was very intellectual. He was a judge, actually, in India, citizen of the British Empire, but he was a judge. And so he was a person of, his writing is, I guess, Victorian would be the best way to describe it. It's very different from what we do today, especially our emails. You know, we make things pretty brief. Well, texting, that's even worse, or even more to the point, I should say. But back then, you know, the writing was just a typical letter was a work of pure literature, and we don't take the time to do that these days. And I'm not so sure that's a bad thing. But when you go back and read some of these early writers, you wonder, can't you just get to the point? You know, and Thomas Troward will say in a sentence, which is about half a page, you know, what most of us try to reduce down to a couple of ideas, a couple of sentences. But I appreciate that era, and I appreciate it for what it is. You know, when you read the Bible, for example, you're reading a language out of a different culture, and you have to kind of translate as you go what it is. King James Version was that Victorian language, and it's pretty difficult to read. It's very poetic. It's very beautiful in a lot of ways. But when you're actually trying to get to the meaning of something, we like to be more concise, you know, more direct in what we're doing. So Troward was a very verbose writer and speaker. Actually, the book, the Edinburgh Lectures, where these steps come from, it was a series of lectures. And it's kind of hard to imagine sitting through it. But back then, you'd be prepared for that. You'd be attuned to that type of communication. So we have to keep that in mind. But I like Thomas Troward. He was a very insightful individual. And, you know, there's just things about him. A lot of people don't like Charles Fillmore. They find him very difficult to read, one of the co-founders of Unity. Myrtle Fillmore is much easier to read. But Charles Fillmore, when you get past the difficulty of his writing, you find some pretty amazing ideas. But I've heard that throughout my career as a minister, that I find Charles Fillmore hard to read. I never did find him hard to read. I don't agree with everything he says, and the longer I go, the more I disagree with some of what he says. Some people used to call him, instead of the co-founder of Unity, the confounder of Unity, but I don't agree with that at all. He was a brilliant individual. He had a very marginal education, I think the equivalent about 4th grade, and he was self-taught. And when you read his works, you would never know that. He just, you know, he was a very profound intellect and a mystic. And so the combination of those two things, you know, makes him a pretty interesting character. But the method in which a message is delivered, it's different in a lot of ways, you know, depending on the writer, depending on the speaker. But what we're looking for is what they're saying. You know, it's not how they say it so much as what is the substance of what is being said, and how can I utilize that? And Thomas Troward points out that the first step is visualization in the manifestation process. One thing you have to keep in mind, and I've heard a lot of people ask this question, is, you know, how do we utilize visualization? And what I want to say is that you've never not utilized it. It's not something you learn. You don't have to learn it. We're doing it all the time. And our life is the product of what we visualize all the time. So it's not a matter of learning something new. It's a matter of being conscious of what we're doing with the faculty of visualization and imagination. That's the secret. It's not learning how to do something new. We all have a life that is unique to us. And why is that? Why don't we have somebody else's life? Or why would we like to have somebody else's life rather than our own? We're all visualizing, we're all living and thinking and reacting and having emotional experiences. We're doing all the things that are required to create a life. The question is it a life that we like? Is it a life we would like to change, we would like to improve? And if so, how do we do it? Well, we do exactly what we've been doing, only we become conscious of how we're doing it. And so that, to me, helps make it simpler. You don't have to learn something new. You already know how to visualize. What's on your kitchen table at the moment, right now? Can you see whatever it is, or some item that you might have set there this morning, or something around your house? Think of your kitchen. Think of your living room. Think of your backyard. You can see all those things instantly. Nobody has to tell you how to do that. You just do it. We don't always remember things, but that's a whole different thing. We visualize, and when you think of, say, your kitchen, do you think of how great of a service it is to you, or do you think of all the things that need to be fixed about it, the things that need to be improved? How are you using your ability to visualize? So that's really what this is about. It's not about learning how to do something new. It's learning about how to be aware of what you're already doing. And that puts the ball in our court all the time. Makes it much easier. Now, what we're talking about here is something that, even though every mainstream Christian is exposed to this type of thinking, people don't tend to translate the ideas that Jesus taught into something that we can use in this regard, in the day-to-day type of experience. There's so much invested in all of the complicated theology that surrounds his life, and that's what I think why I've been kind of harping on the difference between the gospel writers and the message of Jesus. I think our New Thought teachers, like Thomas Troward, understood the principles that people like Jesus taught, and they were simply trying to put them in our hands, trying to put them in a place where we could translate them into a workable life. And as I asked the question, why were the common people attracted to Jesus? And I think it's because he was giving very down-to-earth ideas that they could utilize. He was taking very complex, complicated spiritual, theological things that were the kind of where the religious professionals were required to explain. And he was saying, you don't need that. That's not what the spiritual thing is all about. You are an expression of God. You have a Father. You have a source, a spiritual source. He called it Father. But call no man on earth your father, for you have one Father. He was telling the common people that you have a spiritual source. He wasn't saying, I'm the only begotten Son. John said that, not Jesus. He's saying we all have our Father. We have a spiritual source, and we have a relationship with it. And so the priesthood would make that very complicated so the average person couldn't understand how accessible it was. If they understood how accessible it would put them out of business, which is why I think they were not real happy with Jesus, because he was a person that was not good for the business of religion. He was a person who was good for the person, for people, for passing on spiritual principles in a way that the average person could understand. So that's all we're really doing. So Troward says the first thing to do, and I have edited his statement just to bring it into more concise form, but he says, form a clear picture of your desire with the understanding that by so doing, you impress your desire upon the creative life force. This understanding takes the first step out of the region of fantasy. So why would he say that? It takes this first step out of the region of fantasy. We all are familiar with the idea of daydreaming, which really is the use of visualization that doesn't really produce anything, except maybe a feel-good experience or whatever, to daydream. And many aspects of our life begin with daydreams, actually. I'm not putting that down, but when we think of daydreaming, we're thinking of the use of visualization that's not really intended to go anyplace, except to make us feel better in some way. And that's a very important part of this whole process. But what Troward is saying here is that when you form a clear picture, the creative life force, or God as the creative life force, begins to respond to that. He's just saying that this is a law. This is how it works. And we say, well, I don't get that. And again, all you have to do is say, well, where did your life come from? Where did your life, as you understand it, as you experience it, come from? Did it come from someone else's vision, someone else's imagination, someone else's actions, someone else's emotions? Or is this a product of you? And we say that in a way that may feel demeaning sometimes, because if our life doesn't feel like it's working so well, we don't want to lay, a guilt trip on ourselves for that. But we're not doing that. We're saying that your life and my life is as it is because of what we see all day long, of where we are in our minds all day long. So the law is already in play. We do not invoke the law of manifestation or the process of manifestation. You don't start it or stop it. It's always happening. That's what he's saying. So you form a clear picture of some area that you want to improve, maybe your whole life, that you want to improve. You're taking it out of the realm of fantasy. You're consciously saying, I'm going to visualize, I'm going to set a pattern, a blueprint, a prototype of something that I would like changed or something different. So it's helpful to me to think, well, I'm already doing that, but am I doing it consciously? So that's my task, is to be conscious of how I'm using this faculty of visualization, or this ability to visualize. So this first step is agreed upon by nearly all who advocate visualization techniques associated with goal setting. And I don't know, I'm not a real big fan of the idea of goal setting, and that's probably a fault of mine. But I have seen so many, people get excited about setting goals and not necessarily accomplishing them. I think anything you do, you really have to set a goal. As you know, I'm interested in taking pictures of birds, and I'm trying to get better at that all the time. It's a real challenge to do it, and it's an intriguing challenge. About 45 years ago, I took a picture of an albino sparrow, a very unusual bird. It was in my mother's yard, and she called me up and said, "He's here, bring your camera." So I did, and got a pretty rough picture of him. But the camera is, I took a course years ago in photography and how to use the camera, and I didn't really understand the shutter speed and ISO and aperture and all that kind of thing. It's a balancing act that you have to do. And then when a bird shows up, they don't just stand there and wait for you to take their picture. So you have to think on your feet, but it's a discipline, and it's a learned skill. And there are people that are much better at it than I am, but I'm fascinated with that whole thing. So It's like I am seeing, when I see somebody take a really good picture of something, I take note of that, and that becomes part of my visualization for myself. It's part of the process. If it's achievable by somebody, and see, that's what I would say of Jesus. If he's of any value to us, he takes this wonderful picture, and we've got to be able to do the same thing. Otherwise, it's valueless to us. So we have to put that in perspective. It's beyond where I am at the moment, but it's not beyond where I am. It's not beyond my capacity, my capability. So we set goals for ourselves. We don't achieve them. We get discouraged sometimes. And so maybe there's a different way to look at it, a way that puts it more in our court. Maybe we're listening to the goal-setting instructor more than we're listening to what we're actually interested in. Maybe we're not making it ours. We're making it a demonstration that we can show somebody else. And that's what I find with any hobby or any interest. You do it for yourself. You compete with yourself. It's like playing golf. You know, it's you play against yourself. And the pros would probably not agree with that because there's so much at stake with them. But when I played golf, that's what I always felt. It was, there's always somebody better than me, and there's always somebody worse. So I'm not going to get puffed up because I'm better than that person, or I'm not going to get too depressed because I'm so much worse than that other person. It's you'll never get to the very, very top, and when you do, everybody's going to be shooting for you. They're going to be trying to bring you down because that's just how people are. But this idea of visualization is one that we're using all the time. How are we using it? But every instructor of the mind will agree with this. They all talk about how important it is to visualize and to do it in an intelligent, directed kind of way. So that's what processes like this are all about. We carry the picture of life that we live out on a daily basis. Does this picture align with the life we really want? And that's the question. We're already doing it. So are we aware of what we're carrying around in terms of this film that's going on all the time? Are we aware of that? And I will say that most of the time I'm not aware of it. It's just habit. We're so used to letting the mind, you've heard the term herding cats. You know, you can kind of apply that to your mind, to your own mind. Cats. Our cat doesn't do anything that I tell it to. It doesn't obey in any way whatsoever. And so that's why we love them, I think, because they remind us of ourselves, of our mind. My mind acts just like that cat. So that's what I'm dealing with here. But you give a cat something it likes, and it will kind of go along with things, you know. But my cat has decided that every morning at 4 o'clock, it's time for me to get up. And I cannot talk it out of doing that. It just won't listen to me. It's always on my chest at 4 o'clock in the morning. So it's okay, because I don't mind getting up early. I would rather do it of my own volition, but that's cat for you. So we carry the picture of the life that we live on a daily basis. And I guess the reason to say this is, do we get this? Do we understand that our life is kind of playing out? It's the treasure that we have in our consciousness. It's the content that's playing out all the time. We're always thinking about things. We're always thinking about things in a certain way. Do we think about things the same way everybody else does? Obviously not. And why is that? Why am I using my faculties the way that I'm using them? So that's what we are becoming aware of. So do you believe that the life that you're living is a projection of your own consciousness? That's pretty important to be able to agree upon. Because if you don't think it is, and you can talk to a lot of people that say, no, I'm a victim. It's happening to me. It's not something I'm doing. It's not the way I'm thinking. It's the way the government thinks, or it's the way everybody else or society thinks. I'm a victim of that. So you can do that, but that is part of your process if you do that. And you'll get results exactly like your life will prove that you're true, that you're right. It always proves you're right. If you want to be the victim, you will be the victim. And you can prove to the world that you are. So, do we even agree with this idea that our life is a projection of what is going on in this video world of our mind all the time? If we don't accept some level of that as being true, then none of this will work. None of this matters. So that's really an important part of it. Does this picture align with the life we really want? So we're just becoming aware. That's the point. The point of defining your desire is to be aware when you drift away from it. See, that's why you write things down. That's why you define your desire, so you have something to measure against. So you understand, well, my thinking is way away from what I want here. A good way to do this is write it down. The point of defining your desire is to be aware of when you drift away from it. A good way to do this is to write it down. So writing a thing down doesn't make it happen. That's another, I think, a kind of a superstition that is around this whole visualization thing. To write something down doesn't make it happen. It gives you a benchmark. It gives you a conscious benchmark of what direction you would like to go. And as you're going through your life and you're off on some tangent someplace, you say, is this in alignment with what I'm trying to express? And you can say, no, it's not. And you can bring yourself back. Now, this is going to happen. It's going to happen that when you write something down, you're going to be violating that more than you're agreeing with it initially, for the most part, because again, you're herding cats. It's that consciousness that flies all over the place, and it's like a spoiled, screaming brat, just so used to having its way that it doesn't want to be disciplined, doesn't want to be brought back into alignment with what it is you're wanting to do. So just starting off, or anytime, be willing to accept that you're going to fail more than you succeed. That doesn't sound like a good, positive thing to say, does it? But it's positive because it's true. And if you get upset with yourself because you do it, then you're going to be adding to the problem rather than helping. But your mind is going to be wandering off in directions you do not approve of more than it's going to be on point. And that's what you want to become aware of. And you just gradually bring all those cats back into the one place where you want to go. So awareness is a huge part of this whole process. You start by writing a general overview of the thing or condition you would like to see manifest, and then rework it until you have a clear statement of the good you desire. If you want to be specific about a thing that you would like to manifest in your life, maybe you want a new house, maybe you want to sell your house, maybe you want a new car, or some new opportunity of some kind in your life, you just start out with a general sense of, I just don't feel satisfied with this or that aspect of my life. Start out by throwing it all on paper or computer. I prefer computer over paper. To put all the ideas, the good and the bad, what you like about your life, the direction you would like to go, and what you don't particularly like about it. And work your writing until you can get it into a focus, get into a focused direction. And be flexible with it. As I say all the time, this or something better. But you start by throwing everything on the wall, and whatever sticks you keep, kind of thing. But it is important to acknowledge what you do like and what you don't like about your life. That's very important, because what you don't like about your life can be traced back to something you probably don't like about yourself. And part of achieving something is dropping that kind of baggage. You know, why do we want to achieve anything? So we can be peaceful, so we can be happier, we can be more fulfilled. And if you think about the aspects of your life you don't like, they're connected somehow to something you don't like about yourself. And we don't want to say that as a criticism. We don't want to say that as, well, you must not like yourself very much at all. We say that to become aware. What is this? What is this thing that needs to go? So much of, it's the climbing of the ladder. In order to go to the next step, you have to let go of the one you're on, let go of the rung you're on. And the rung you're on is not necessarily a bad place or a bad thing. It's just that you want to move on. You want to move to another place. And part of moving on to another place is, again, acknowledging where you are. And if there's something about your life you don't like, then it can be traced back to something about yourself you don't like. When you make peace with that part of yourself, even a little bit of peace, you'll begin to see other ways to deal with this particular aspect. It's not really rocket science. It's just awareness. I'll stress that. So when you get your thing written out, you ask yourself the question, how would I feel if this desire were manifested now? So you want to understand what visualization is. It's how you answer this question. How would I feel if this desire were manifest now? And whatever it is that you have written down, you ask yourself, how would you feel if it were accomplished? And you feel that. You feel that freedom or that joy. Whatever it is that you however you answer that question. You spend time considering your feelings, then rewrite your statement in a way that includes them. So this is a process. I'm talking about this once a week. This could take you several months just to get yourself a statement, to get yourself a direction. So we're not trying to rush this. It's like, again, planting the seed. How long does it take for it to come up? It takes quite a while in our thinking, not in the seed's thinking. But how would I feel if this desire were manifested now? And you take the feelings, the positive feelings, and you incorporate them in your statement. I would give you an example of a statement, but I don't think that's fair to do, because I have, what I would write down would be something very different from what you would write down. But we all know the areas of our life that we don't like. We're trying to avoid them all the time. We're trying to fix them, trying to put them in order, or trying to ignore them. That's sometimes how we deal with them, is just ignore them. But we don't want to do that. We want to take in the whole thing and show up this daily life. That's what somebody said. The problem with life is it's so daily. Well, it is. And that's probably a good thing. But whatever it is, whatever direction we want to go, how would you feel if it were manifested now? And then incorporate those feelings into the statement. So a vision consists of imagery and feelings. A vision and feeling. See yourself free and happy, that your desired good has come about. So it's seeing, it's imagery, and it's feeling. It's both. That's why you say, how would I feel if this were to come about? You want to get your feeling level moving in that direction as well. So a vision is not just what you see, it's what you feel as well. And maybe that's more important, because you can try to think positive and feel like heck. Never see yourself struggling to bring about your desire. As the step points out, you are impressing your desire upon the creative life force, infinite wisdom and intelligence that knows no restrictions and is never hindered by appearances. And here's where we think about the correlation with the seed. You don't make the seed grow. You create the conditions so the seed can grow. And that's basically what we're doing here. There's something that is moving through us all the time. Your life is proof of that. And it's producing that. So that's already happening. So we're not trying to force something. We're redirecting. It's like we irrigated that side of the yard, now we're going to irrigate this side of the yard. We're going to move things around, move them to a different place. And the water's not going to complain. It doesn't care where you point it. It's okay. There's nothing that has to be explained. So read your statement with conviction at least twice a day, once in the morning and once at bedtime, and then throughout your day when possible. Do not struggle to make it true. Know that it is true. And this is the probably the most difficult thing to do, is plant the seed and let it go. But that's what we're going to talk about through all the steps, the 5 steps. This is just the beginning. So if you haven't done this, and maybe you don't intend to do it, but I would just suggest that if there's an area in your life you'd like to improve, try this. Try using this technique that will unfold through the next 4 weeks and see what you think. All right? Thank you for coming out. Hope to see you next week.
You've been watching a talk given by Reverend Doug Botworth here at Independent Unity in beautiful Grand Junction, Colorado. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. It really helps us spread our message. If you would like to support us, you can do so by clicking the button in the right-hand corner of the video screen. We greatly appreciate your support. Thanks again for watching.